Good evening, everybody. A defiant North Korea issuing more threats against the United States as geopolitical experts warn the rogue nation is primed and ready to conduct what would be its sixth nuclear test. That test could come as early as tomorrow, celebrating the 105th birthday of Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung. The rhetoric from Pyongyang has risen exponentially over the past week. A North Korean official today warning of a preemptive strike against the United States if America takes what it called reckless military action. The North Korean vice minister telling the Associated Press, quote, "We've got a powerful nuclear deterrent already in our hands, and we certainly will not keep our arms crossed in the face of a U.S. preemptive strike." North Korea is the only country to carry out nuclear tests since 1998. Pakistan conducting 2 tests in 1998, India one in 1998, China one in 1996, France in 96 as well. China's foreign minister responding to the provocations by urging both the United States and North Korea to, quote, refrain from inflammatory or threatening statements. Apparently, the word didn't get to Pyongyang, and the United States is responding with a show of force. The powerful aircraft carrier Carl Vinson Strike Group is rushing to get on station in the Sea of Japan off the Korean Peninsula. It is scheduled to arrive in that region around April 24th. Vice President Mike Pence also scheduled to be in Seoul, South Korea by tomorrow, Sunday, to kick off a 10-day trip to Asia-Pacific countries. This has been a busy week for the Trump administration. Its officials traveling all over the world. It's confronted global threats, not just from North Korea, but also Syria, Russia, Iran, and the Islamic State. The Pentagon today releasing video of the so-called Moab bomb that had dropped on Islamic State tunnels in eastern Afghanistan. The Afghan officials now are saying between 36 and 70 Islamic State terrorists were present at the time of the strike. It had a blast radius of 1 mile, and according to the top U.S. military commander in Afghanistan, General John Nicholson, the decision to drop the largest conventional bomb ever deployed in combat came from decision makers on the ground in the theater, not Washington.
We had persistent surveillance over the area before, during, and after the operation, and now we have Afghan and U.S. forces on the site and see no evidence of civilian casualties, nor have there been any reports of civilian casualties.
And joining us tonight to discuss the military operations in Afghanistan, what the United States should do if North Korea were to conduct a 6th nuclear test this weekend, Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane. General, good to have you with us. Let's start with that bomb, the Moab, the massive ordnance air blast bomb called the mother of all bombs. Its impact is extraordinary, never used before, and it looks like it's the choice to use it now was at the perfect time and the perfect place.
Yeah, it's a nasty bomb, Lou. It obviously has a tremendous blast effect, but it's got incendiary fuel as well, and that goes into these caves and tunnels. So it's a fiery, devastating death for those people who are in it, to be sure. We haven't used this bomb, obviously. We have the technology to support it. There's another bomb that we have as well, as a deep penetrator that goes down to get secret sites that are 200 feet down or whatever. It's classified how far that bomb goes. So this is advanced technology that other countries truly do not have.
And this not only, of course, devastating to the Islamic State, and I would think would put Pakistan on notice as well that refuge is no longer going to be permitted. That's an inference on my part. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's part of it, to be sure. What this is this was an ISIS safe haven. And we've got to go after safe havens. The biggest mistake of 9/11 was not taking down the safe haven in Afghanistan. By the way, for our viewers to understand, not too far from this location is where Osama bin Laden and his thugs were. We let that stay, and we got 9/11. So when we find safe havens like this, we got to go after. This is ISIS. It's called the Khorasan group. They travel freely back and forth from Pakistan to Afghanistan. Some of them are former Pakistan Taliban. Some of them are former Afghan Taliban, now belonging to ISIS. So this is we had good intelligence. It's a good target. And Nicholson did not want Afghan infantry having to go in there. They tried it once, took casualties, and this was a much better answer than that. So his message was to destroy ISIS. Other people certainly seeing the weight of military power by the United States get other messages from it, to be sure.
The rhetoric, however, from North Korea rising, it is more bellicose, if anything, more threatening. How is there a red line here? If Kim Jong-il is to set off a sixth nuclear test, are there to be repercussions? What will occur?
There'll be no military repercussions for that. That'll be number 6. We've endured 5 before that. Right. A lot of the language, I think, is leading up to him doing something like that. The aircraft carrier and the strike force that's there, it's largely there to reassure our allies, the South Koreans and the Japanese, that we do have their back. The administration wants to send a loud signal. Vice President Pence going there for the same reason. There's political instability in South Korea. We're a little worried about it. We had a president there who was corrupt but strong on North Korea and strong on defense. We're likely to get another president that's hopefully less corrupt, but we believe it's going to be not as strong on defense and not as strong on North Korea. So part of this is strengthening the spine of the South Koreans as well.
And as we go into this weekend, China issuing a warning to both North Korea, it seemed, and the United States, suggesting that any party that permits this to spiral out of control, that is the threats, the escalating threats and the rhetoric, would have a historical responsibility, a clear warning to both countries, but at the same time it was not a specific warning to North Korea, nor is there the focus on constraining North Korea that I'm sure the president would have liked to have seen.
Well, you know, China may play a responsible role here for the first time. As you know, we've had 3 presidents who've tried to leverage China to coerce the North Koreans to denuclearize. All of that failed. But on Wednesday night, President Xi called our president, spoke for an hour, takes a little time going through interpreters, and he told our president, as a follow-up to the Mar-a-Lago bilateral discussions they had, something that was pretty stunning. He said, I'm willing to move and take some action to help to denuclearize North Korea. If that turns into action, and it's not just rhetoric, that is a major, major foreign policy achievement, and certainly that would change the whole security situation in that part of the world. We have to see if that really turns into implementation, which will get some results. But that statement alone is something his predecessors haven't made.
All right. And as you say, now all that has to happen is it be turned to action, and that we'll know in relatively short order, it seems, given the way things are going between North Korea and the United States right now. General Jack Keane, as always, great to have you with us. Thanks.
Good talking to you, Lou.
We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. Standards by disclosing classified information. The request by Judicial Watch pointing to comments made by Congressman Adam Schiff in March, Congresswoman Jackie Speer in April. Judicial Watch arguing the Democrats' remarks raised the same concerns that forced House Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes to recuse himself from leading the committee's investigation into Russia and the Obama administration's spy scandal. The former Trump advisor who was spied on by Obama-era intelligence agencies is now slamming what he calls the false allegations against him. Carter Page appearing on the O'Reilly Factor last night. There he denied allegations of improper communications with Russian officials.
I'm very encouraged that all of the lies that have been a drag on this administration are finally coming out into the open. So many people have lied against me from the Clinton campaign and many of their surrogates. Let's see what actually comes out.
And joining me now to discuss the Obama spy scandal, the deep state, and much more, the executive editor of the Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor Fred Barnes, and RNC National Committeeman, former chairman of the Republican Lawyers Association, Randy Evans. Good to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Fred, let's start with this. More vindication for President Trump as we have Carter Page saying false evidence allowed a warrant to permit investigators to go after him. Your thoughts?
Well, they're going after Carter Page, but I think you were suggesting that their real target is Trump. You know, it's been reported, Lou, that they first went to the Foreign Intelligence Survey Group, FISA, where the judges are, to get them to get surveillance on Trump himself, but they turned it down, and their second guy was Carter Page. He's kind of a slippery character, but he does talk to the Russians a lot, so they could make the case that he was somehow helping the Russians, and now they have the surveillance. But
the technique is called, by the way, for the audience's benefit, it's called reverse targeting. Find someone near your actual target and file away for FISA. Which, by the way, Randy, apparently FISA, that court doesn't often say no to anybody. I mean, I thought they're supposed to have this highfalutin standard. You remember James Comey talking about paperwork deep as his fist, which is an interesting metric. I mean, they always give it, apparently, but not in this case.
It's typically a matter of routine with the FISA court because, generally speaking, if the intelligence agencies say they need the information, the assumption is they probably do. What we've seen here, though, is such a dramatic turnaround. I just want you to remember a few months ago, Lou, when all of the Democrats and the former president just expressed shock that Donald Trump would even suggest the possibility that his administration was in fact spying on a political opposition party. Now what we're seeing is day after day how broad that investigation, how broad that spying on political opposition in fact went.
Yeah, the very idea that the Obama administration in any form would protest after we find out that they widened the dissemination of raw intelligence, that they were, they might as well have camped outside the FISA court as many times as they were there seeking warrants for surveillance. We also see Judicial Watch calling for an investigation into Schiff and Speer. Both made remarks that indirectly confirmed the leaked transcript between Mike Flynn and the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. I mean, that's quite a, there's not going to be much left of the ranking members of that committee at this rate.
Well, it was pretty obvious. It was pretty obvious that they knew something was up when we suddenly saw Adam Schiff running from cameras rather than running to cameras. I knew then that the wheel had turned.
It has turned, and look, the media doesn't want to cover this. They've really ignored it as much as they've been able to, which is actually a lot. But it is building. And I don't think it'll stop. I mean, Carter Page is not a major figure. I don't think he ever talked to Trump. He was a foreign policy advisor, but the idea was he was just a beginning.
Yeah. Well, the major figures in whether it was Watergate or whatever it may be weren't household names until they became household names either. talk about the influence right now in the White House. Quite a dynamic. Jared, Ivanka, Bannon, Gary Cohn. I mean, tremendous pressures are building here. Your thoughts, Randy, on what's happening within the White House?
Well, most of the folks in that White House are really good friends of mine, so I'll be a little careful. But I will say that I think the White House is starting to settle into a definitional phase. That is, where we have people
Wait a minute, I want to write that down. Definitional
phase. Good. And here's what I mean
all
by
hell
that.
is about to break loose, personally.
No.
But you go ahead.
I think you and I talked about this a couple of months ago, which is Donald Trump's going to govern with a meritocracy. You deliver, you get heard, you get your policies promoted. I think we're starting to see that steadily emerge. Gary Cohn's done a great job of putting a team together. He's got some real professionals behind him. It's not surprising that he gets the presidency here a little more than, say, those who have yet to fill out their agencies and departments.
And Lou, remember who introduced Gary Cohn to Donald Trump? Jared Kushner, the son-in-law. Right. So he came.
I love what Randy just said. You got to give him credit for having an organized team and doing this. And I remind everybody, the idea for the Trump administration was that they would disorganize and disrupt and would get moving. But meanwhile, we're giving high points here suddenly, Randy, to a fellow who is as establishment and left-wing as anybody in the White House. I mean, give me a break.
I'm not giving him high points. What I'm saying to you is those who would put together their teams and can influence policy so as to disrupt, so as to build a consensus toward tax cuts, they're going to get there first.
Yeah. Lou, he came in, and these experts he brought in.
You mean the tax cuts that Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller had introduced as a principal idea for the candidate, which he, by the way, himself had sought. But now Gary Cohn gets credit for all of that, Fred? I mean, this doesn't seem fair.
No, I fear he's going to change all that. You remember what Trump campaigned on, and it was a plan drafted by Steve Moore and Larry Kudlow, and it was cutting the business tax down to 20% or low, down from 35%, and Larry Kudlow, and it was cutting the business tax down to 20% or low, down from 35%, and repatriating all that money that's been overseas and all these things. I don't think we're going to see that in the plan. Remember, Gary Cohn's the guy that had a trial balloon recently in favor of a carbon tax.
I'm not sure it's a trial balloon, other than maybe a perfect conviction on his part about what a brilliant idea that is.
I hope it's a trial balloon. Well, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
We're watching something kind of special right now, guys. No matter how anybody wants to turn it or twist it, we have got a real palace contest underway here. And I'm not sure that it's a values-oriented discussion, debate, or contest. Are you?
Well, I'm not either. Look, but the National Economic Council, which is headed by Gary Cohn, is a powerful body. He's either the second or third most important aide in the entire White House. You have the National Security Advisor and the Chief of Staff.
Randy, you get 15 seconds here, please.
Mine is judge it all by the results of what happens in the end. When tax cuts are passed, Lou, you're going to look back on this show and you're going to say, Randy, you were dead on.
And when I do, I'm going to be struggling. Remember what you said about those tax cuts. What did you say?
That we're going to get tax cuts.
Oh, okay.
I said we will get tax cuts.
All right.
Well, they better be big.
Well, not if all your pals over there in the House leadership, including Paul Ryan, have their way. Hell, he won't even give the president a shot at his wall. And that only cost $1.5 billion for the first installment, but that's for another show, another day. Fred Barnes, Randy Evans, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe China's warning will prevent Kim Jong-un from carrying out what would be a sixth nuclear test, while the rest of the world hasn't run one since 1998. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs, and follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, markets closed for Good Friday. The Commerce Department today reporting retail sales fell for a second straight month, down 0.2%. California's Department of Motor Vehicles granting Apple a permit to conduct tests of those self-driving cars on public highways. And United's chairman, the latest airline official to offer his apologies to Dr. David Dow after the passenger was dragged off a flight. United shares down more than 2.5% this week. And by the way, they discovered a scorpion, which bit one passenger as well, but we'll save more of that for next week. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. President Trump tonight in Florida after what has been certainly a busy week combating rising geopolitical threats. The president reversing himself on a number of promises, and those moves raising questions among particularly the national left-wing media and some of his supporters about what or who is behind them. Fox News correspondent Kevin Corke at the White House, and he has the intriguing report.
For President Trump, this may end up being a sun-splashed Easter weekend in Florida. But in some conservative circles, clouds of concern are building, especially after a series of recent policy decisions that are at direct odds with previously held positions by the president, including notable reversals on NATO, the Exim Bank, Chinese currency manipulation, even his view of Fed Chair Janet Yellen. A shift seemingly that coincides with the reduced role of chief strategist Steve Bannon, once dubbed by Time magazine the great manipulator. Bannon has been at odds with Mr. Trump's son-in-law and fellow advisor Jared Kushner, who often sides with his wife Ivanka Trump on major policy matters, a political Game of Thrones that many conservatives fear will pull the president to the left on climate change, abortion, and policing, for example, an affront to his base, they say, and in direct contrast to campaign rhetoric that propelled him into office. Said Rich Lowry of the National Review, this group is all Democrats who have marinated for decades in the financial and social elite of Manhattan. If Jared and Ivanka end up running the joint, it'd be hard to overstate the turnabout from last year's campaign.
He has, for whatever reason, chosen to surround himself with a number of establishment Republicans who I don't think really understand Trumpism, don't understand the larger currents that got him elected.
Brent Bazell of the Media Research Center says Trump has to energize his base with more than just talk, because if they don't do it, I absolutely guarantee you that conservatives will walk. But is that really true? Some analysts suggest that just as they did during the campaign, Trump's base simply won't care about his inconsistencies.
They elected a man knowing that he is very flexible ideologically. They said, that's not what's interesting. That's not of interest to us. We think he can get things done.
Now, Lou, you know the game. The White House will tell you right off the bat the president will be loyal to his base, and he will defend all American people, but he'll also remain very flexible in the process. And that's perhaps best evidenced by today's decision by White House officials.
Даниссимо. Изысканное удовольствие. Когда появляется легкий голод, его ничто не может остановить.
But he'll also remain very flexible in the process. And that's perhaps best evidenced by today's decision by White House officials to decline to name China a currency manipulator, while telling us they will also keep an eye on at least 6 other countries. Lou?
Kevin, thanks so much. Kevin Corke reporting from the White House. The president showing flexibility that just about everybody, including the base, would have been screaming for him to offer up as president some 6 months ago. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. Health insurers calling on the Trump administration to stabilize Obamacare as it works to repeal and replace the law. HHS just yesterday released a set of fixes for 2018. They include a shortened open enrollment period, allowing insurers to require people to pay past due premiums before enrolling in a new plan, flexibility to offer plans with fewer options. By the way, both fixes part of the suggested compromise for what would be Ryan Care if they can move it through the House. Either way, it's not good news for Obamacare and for the federal government, which is going to have to meet those tests. President Trump earlier this week threatening to withhold payments to insurers as a way to force Democrats to negotiate on the repeal and replacement efforts in the House. Joining me now to talk about these latest developments on Obamacare, the foreign policy challenges confronting the Trump administration, Steve Forbes, Forbes Media Chairman, Editor-in-Chief. Great to have you here.
Good to be here.
And let's start with this this monstrosity of a mess called Obamacare. We're looking at fixes that will have to be organized by the Trump administration and this House. This is exactly what they couldn't get done a few weeks ago.
Well, they always keep telling us that they're on the verge of an agreement that's going to bring everyone together.
They being Paul Ryan.
We've heard those stories before. Right. Nice if it would be true. But I think they made a strategic error this week in going back to health care instead of pushing a pure, simple, big tax cut to give this economy a real kick. And then you can go to health care. You'll have the credibility, the capital to do it. So go, it works. We know tax cuts work. Do it.
This is starting to look very bad.
By the way, you saw that in that Kansas congressional race earlier this week, from a 31-point margin down to 7. Georgia next week, not looking good.
And that's a contest that right now you can it looks like a toss-up that's going to a runoff. In Georgia, you have to win 50% of it to be the winner outright, and it looks like it's going to be, according to those in the know, the Democrat will not get that majority and that the Republicans will prevail. Do you agree with that view?
Depends all on turnout. This time the Democrats are motivated, as we saw in Kansas.
Right.
If the Democrats had gotten involved earlier, they could have won that race.
How much more of Paul Ryan can the Republicans stand? He comes out and now says that he will not be funding the wall, which is one of the president's campaign promises. It's one thing for the president of the United States to express pragmatism and adroitness. It is another to be told to go to hell by the speaker. He's told the president to go to hell on Obamacare. He screwed that up to a fairly well. How much more of this can be tolerated if the Republicans want to hold the House?
What the Republicans have to do, and it's got to come from the Oval Office, is to say, health care is nice, keep working at it, boys, but we want a tax cut and we want it soon. Make it simple. You don't have to do a big reform now. We just got to get those rates down, get that money overseas back home, investing in the American economy, and then we can take care of the rest.
That sounds good, but that's not what's being said, either by the members of the House of Representatives, not by the White House. Instead, you've got Steve Cohen on one arc, you've got Paul Ryan on another, you have the rest of the White House trying to preserve the campaign agenda of President Trump. Something has to give here.
What gives are these special elections. There's going to be one in June in Montana for another seat. There
are 4 seats, one decided.
And if they go as they did in Kansas, that's a shot across the bow. And there'll be 2 reactions. On the House side, they'll say, oh, we shouldn't do anything because that'll upset people. But I think the president's going to take that as a message. I got to deliver something big, and we got to do it now.
The president is the only one, in point of fact, whose seat is assured in 2018.
Yes.
Paul Ryan, what he is doing to the conference right now, he's simply not creating consensus around the president's agenda. He is actively fighting it. He is doing so in public view, and it's a remarkable historical moment because this man is still talking about his quote-unquote better way agenda while the president is trying to push through his. and is being assisted by Gary Cohn, for crying out loud. They're back to square one on tax reform. They obviously don't know what the hell they want to push through Congress. That's the White House, and Paul Ryan wants a border tax.
That's why.
And Gary Cohn as well, right?
Yes, and Kevin Hassett, the new head of the House of Economic Advisors.
What do you make of Kevin Hassett? I mean, here's a guy who's pro-outsourcing, pro-immigration. Are you kidding me? At what point does the joke get a little bit irritating?
Well, this is where the president has to lay down the law. Tax cuts, get that done. We'll discuss the rest.
Yeah.
And get rid of that crazy border tax. I mean, who would have thought that House Republicans would be in favor of a 20% national
Who would have
sales
thought
tax?
that the president who campaigned saying he'll build the wall would put up with a speaker who says that he won't appropriate money for the wall, and a head of the National Economic Council who hasn't done anything on that council to this point, who now is making it clear he wants a border tax, offshoring, and immigration, for crying out loud. Steve Forbes, we're out of time. You get the last word.
2018 could be the Republican equivalent of 2010 for the Democrats if they don't get their act together on taxes. Get that economy moving. Warning. And Paul Ryan will be looking for other opportunities.
Well,
maybe as a Fox commentator.
Yeah, I was thinking of him more over at Forbes.
Well, we could have him.
You've got an open invitation.
We can have a contributor where
we
you
get
paid, but you get paid by traffic. So he's got to earn his own way, which he hasn't yet.
Michigan's capital city of Lansing reversing its decision to be a sanctuary city just 9 days after it embraced that controversial status. Joining me now is the Democratic mayor of Lansing, Verge Bernero. Great to have you with us, Mr. Mayor. And you're in the spotlight now, and driving the decision basically was what?
Well, Lou, I've been a big fan for a long time. I had Exporting America by my bedside for months in 2004. We stood together on Buying American. You were there before anybody.
Well, thank you very much.
No, I mean it. So, look, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I issued an executive order to clarify things, to have a written policy on how to deal with undocumented people. We never had that. The city council, this was a political statement. It's a political year. It's an election year. And this is democracy in action. I'm delighted to live in a country where there is a lot of input, and it's a participatory sport. So who knows where it'll end up, but we're trying to treat people the right way. We're trying to be fair. We put public safety first. We lock up people. We go after people who break the law equally.
Yeah, you know, isn't it interesting that a lot of, nearly everyone is basically concentrated on the message from your Chamber of Commerce in Lansing saying businesses were being hurt, rather than the issue of public safety, which is underlies the reason that sanctuary cities right now are being told they're going to lose federal funding for law enforcement. Did they both hold equal weight in your judgment and that of the city council? Is there one preeminent over the other?
It's hard to say, and we have a strong mayor form of government. Again, the council, I'm not saying it's inconsequential, but I run the police department. They fund it. And people do want to stand up to Trump. A lot of people feel that the hateful rhetoric, that it's divisive. Our police department tries to build on community policing and work with people. There's concern that this current focus on illegal immigrants and kind of putting them all in one barrel is that it will lead to discrimination.
Mr. Mayor, and I love the fact you bought my first book back in 2004 on all of this, but the president has made it clear, the attorney general has made it clear, they're going after criminal illegal immigrants. That's their focus, that's their priority.
And if that's their focus, Lou, we will be with them 100%, because that's our focus, is keeping everybody safe.
And you're pleased with the decision you made to reverse sanctuary status? Because you don't sound that way.
Well, again, that was the council that did that. I didn't use the term sanctuary city in my thing because I think it is polarizing, it is divisive, and what we need is a policy that works for everybody. And we aren't discriminating, we aren't profiling, and we work with ICE, we work with the FBI, we work cooperatively with the federal government, but we are not ICE.
All right, Mayor, good to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Look forward to chatting again.
You got it. And by the way, we got 4 other books out since Exporting America back in.
I noticed. Yep, I got to catch up.
You got it. Mr. Mayor, good to have you with us. Verge Bernero, thanks so much. Up next, the New York Times outraged at President Trump, and you won't believe why.
I think like a lot of other things with this White House, what we've seen is a lack of staffing, a lack of organization, a lack of understanding of sort of the magnitude of the task.
What? What has them so angry? We'll tell you. We'll take it up with Tammy Bruce and Dom Giordano here next. Stay with us. In our online poll, we ask you, should the House GOP leadership stop siding with the Dems and perhaps find the will, the power, the way to fund the president's border wall now? 96% of you say yes, they definitely should. The New York Times lashing out at President Trump over the annual Easter egg roll for White House. White House reporter Julie Hirschfield Davis wrote an article entitled, quote, "The latest test for the White House pulling off its Easter egg roll. What's the big deal, the scandal? The administration," she reports, "missed a deadline to order commemorative wooden eggs for the event, then had to rush order them." My gosh. I mean, that's where we are. We're joined now by Tammy Bruce and Dom Giordano. Thank you both for being here. Tammy, wouldn't you know? I mean, the left is so desperate for something to bellyache about, they go to the Easter egg roll, which seems fine to me.
Well, it looks like President Trump, though, did not miss the deadline to bomb ISIS in Afghanistan. And for, I think, most Americans, that's the deadline that really counts. Yeah. And then there's going to be another deadline, apparently, tomorrow. So this is just petty. It's like Mrs. Kravitz in Bewitched, the gossip of the neighborhood where nothing is ever right, and they're always looking in the window, and they're always complaining. It's petty, and it's stupid, and it's childish. And then the First Lady has tweeted, everyone's going to have a great time at the Easter egg roll on Monday, and I think they will. But it just goes to show you the ridiculousness of how far they've sunk, and how he could, as they say, come up with a cure for cancer tomorrow, and they'd call that a mistake as well.
Dom, do you think that CNN and the Times and others, they just don't have a pure heart when it comes to the Trump administration, perhaps?
And Lou, I mean, there are policy differences, things that people really are concerned about that can be debated. But when you do this type of thing and you put this out there on this level, and they're aching to get a meme going here, that this shows they haven't staffed and people are going to die somehow or another at various levels. My advice, I'll put on my advisor hat to the Trump administration, order the big Christmas tree right now. Maybe bring it in a couple weeks. That way you can get ahead of the curve and show the New York Times where you are.
Let's turn to if we may, Obamacare, more emergency funding and steps necessary to save it in 2018. Tammy, this is getting awful. At the same time, the Speaker of the House saying he will not fund the wall for the president who ran on the wall, as much as any other issue that he talked about. Where is this headed with the Speaker?
That we saw, obviously, with the problems before with the last attempt to pass Obamacare, that this is a speaker who's out of his league, he's in over his head. Now with some of the changes...
He may take the party with him. This is no longer just an individual matter. This is a speaker who now has the capacity to destroy a good chunk of the Republican Party and change the party in control.
Well, the good news is that with the Freedom Caucus and other individuals, of course, in the House, the Republican Party has a lot of very smart, very capable people who recognize that this
So what are they going to do about it?
Well, obviously, I think the option is it depends really on what the president's now going to do as he leads.
What's the president going to do about it?
I think that obviously the call should be for there to be a new speaker. There's got to be someone who supports the president's agenda. This is Ryan. He's been in there for now 7 years. They didn't even make an effort to have a correct plan for the replacement of Obamacare. Didn't make an effort to find unity. He's not going to do it now.
Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Tammy, Lou, and I know that's an awful thing and turmoil and all that. But Paul Ryan, I think, is both a guy who doesn't believe in the same things, and he's incapable. He can't even drive toward anything. He really killed them during the health care debate first time, and this time I think Trump is bypassing him.
It was a debacle, and I think this is the kind of change that has to happen. That debacle, that set a tone, and it was absurd.
You know, I want to say this and see what you think. I truly believe that President Trump is at a very similar position to that of President Obama at this stage in his presidency. President Obama had the opportunity to be a historical president, and so does President Trump. Both could go